The morning sun cast long shadows across the training facility as Commander Sarah Mitchell adjusted her tactical vest one final time. At 32, she had spent the last 8 years proving herself in a world where women were still fighting for recognition. Today would be different. Today, she would address the most elite fighting force in the military, SEAL Team 7. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reviewed her notes. Not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility she carried. The briefing she was about to give could change the course of a critical mission in Afghanistan. Intelligence reports had been coming in for weeks about a high-value target hiding in a compound near Kandahar. What the SEALs didn't know was that Sarah had spent 3 years undercover in that exact region, speaking the local dialect fluently and understanding the cultural dynamics that could make or break their operation. The conference room fell silent as 24 of the Navy's most decorated warriors filed in. Their faces showed the weathered marks of countless deployments, their eyes sharp with the kind of alertness that kept them alive in the world's most dangerous places. Lieutenant Commander Jake Rodriguez led the team, his reputation preceding him like a shadow. He had completed over 40 successful missions and lost only 2 men in his entire career. His team respected him, but they also knew he had old-school views about women in combat roles. Sarah stood at the front of the room, her 5'6" frame dwarfed by the imposing presence of the SEALs. She had faced Taliban fighters, navigated political minefields in Washington, and survived interrogation training that broke grown men. Yet standing before these warriors felt like the ultimate test of her career. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice steady and clear, "I'm Commander Mitchell, and I'll be briefing you on Operation Desert Falcon." A few of the SEALs exchanged glances. They had expected their usual intelligence officer, not this woman they had never seen before. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The room's energy shifted, becoming heavy with unspoken skepticism. Sarah clicked to her first slide, showing satellite imagery of the target compound. "Our primary objective is Hassan al-Mahmoud, a high-ranking Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces in the southern provinces." "Ma'am," interrupted Petty Officer First Class Danny Torres, his Texas drawl cutting through the tension. "We've been briefed on al-Mahmoud before. What makes this intel different?" Sarah paused, meeting his gaze directly. "Because I lived in that village for 8 months, Petty Officer Torres. I know every alleyway, every family connection, and every escape route al-Mahmoud has used in the past 2 years." The room stirred with interest, but Rodriguez remained unmoved. "With all due respect, Commander, intelligence analysis is different from field operations. My boys have been running ops in Afghanistan for years. We know how to handle ourselves." "I'm not questioning your team's capabilities, Lieutenant Commander," Sarah replied calmly. "I'm here to provide you with information that could save their lives." She advanced to the next slide, showing detailed floor plans of the compound. "Al-Mahmoud isn't just hiding in this building. He's using it as a base for training suicide bombers. The compound is rigged with explosives, and there are civilians, including children, being held as human shields." The SEALs leaned forward, their attention sharpening. This was information they hadn't received in their preliminary briefings. Sarah continued, her confidence growing as she saw their engagement. The traditional approach would be a night raid, fast and hard. But al-Mahmoud expects that. He's moved his operation underground, literally. There's a tunnel system beneath the compound that connects to 3 other buildings in the village. Rodriguez frowned. "Our satellite imagery doesn't show any tunnel entrances." "Because they're hidden beneath prayer rugs and false floors," Sarah explained. "The villagers have been forced to participate in concealing these tunnels. If you go in heavy, al-Mahmoud will escape through the tunnels while triggering the explosives above. You'll lose your target and, potentially kill innocent civilians." The room had gone completely quiet now. Even the skeptical faces showed grudging interest. Sarah had their attention, but she could sense the underlying tension. These men were used to planning their own operations, used to being the experts in the room. "So what do you propose?" asked Chief Petty Officer Mike Chen, the team's explosives expert. "A coordinated 3-phase approach," Sarah said, advancing to her tactical overview. First, we position teams at each tunnel exit before you breach the main compound. Second, we use non-lethal methods to extract the civilians before engaging Al Mahmoud. Third, we have a psychological operations component that I personally developed based on Al Mahmoud's psychological profile. Rodriguez shifted in his seat. Psychological operations? Commander, we're not therapists. We're here to eliminate a target. And I'm here to help you do that successfully, Sarah responded, her voice gaining strength. Al Mahmoud has a weakness. He's extremely paranoid about betrayal, especially from women. During my time undercover, I learned that his sister betrayed him to coalition forces 3 years ago. She gave information that led to the death of his youngest son. The SEALs exchanged glances. This was intelligence gold, the kind of personal information that could turn a mission from dangerous to manageable. Sarah continued, if we approach this correctly, we can use his paranoia against him. I've developed a strategy that involves, hold on, Rodriguez interrupted, standing up abruptly. Let me get this straight. You want my team to base their tactics on some psychological game you've cooked up? These men put their lives on the line every time they step out that door. I'm not about to risk them on untested theories. The room tensed. Several SEALs looked between their commander and Sarah, sensing the escalating conflict. Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but she forced herself to remain calm. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, she said, her voice steady but firm, this isn't an untested theory. This is actionable intelligence based on 18 months of direct observation and interaction. I'm not asking you to take unnecessary risks. I'm offering you a way to minimize them. You're asking me to trust the life of my team to someone who's never been in combat, Rodriguez shot back, his voice rising slightly. No offense, Commander, but briefing rooms and battlefields are two different worlds. Sarah felt the familiar sting of assumption. It was always the same. People saw her clean uniform, her analytical approach, and assumed she had never faced real danger. They didn't know about the night she had crawled through a minefield to extract wounded Afghan soldiers. They didn't know about the 3 assassination attempts she had survived while undercover. They didn't know about the scars hidden beneath her perfectly pressed uniform. Lieutenant Commander, she began, her voice carrying a new edge, you're right that briefing rooms and battlefields are different. But you're wrong about my experience in both. The room went dead silent. Even Rodriguez seemed to pick up on the change in her tone. Sarah moved away from her presentation slides and stood directly in front of the assembled team. 2 years ago, I spent 6 months embedded with Afghan National Army units in Helmand province. I've been under fire more times than I can count. I've extracted wounded soldiers from ambush sites. I've interrogated captured Taliban fighters in the field, not in some air-conditioned facility back in Kabul. She paused, scanning the faces before her. I've also lost good people. People whose lives were lost because intelligence was incomplete or because operational assumptions were wrong. That's why I'm here. That's why this briefing matters. Rodriguez's expression had shifted from dismissive to uncertain. He could hear something in her voice that spoke to experiences he recognized, the weight that came with responsibility for others' lives. The man you're going after isn't just another target, Sarah continued. He's responsible for the deaths of 43 coalition soldiers in the past year alone. He's trained over 200 suicide bombers. He's turned children into weapons. And he's about to slip through our fingers again unless we approach this differently. The silence stretched on for long seconds. Finally, Petty Officer Torres spoke up. Ma'am, you said you lived in that village for 8 months. How exactly does someone like you blend in for that long without getting made? Sarah smiled grimly. Very carefully, Petty Officer. And, with the help of some very brave Afghan women who risked their lives to protect mine. Rodriguez had retaken his seat, but his posture remained rigid. Even if everything you're saying is accurate, Commander, my job is to protect my team. Your plan sounds complicated. In my experience, complicated plans are where things go wrong. Simple plans can go wrong too, Lieutenant Commander, Sarah replied. Especially when the enemy knows you're coming. She returned to her presentation, clicking to a new slide showing recent intelligence photos. These were taken 3 days ago. Al-Mahmoud has increased security around the compound. He's brought in additional fighters. He knows something is coming. The photos showed armed men positioned at strategic points around the target building, clearly preparing for an assault. Rodriguez studied them intently, his tactical mind automatically analyzing the defensive positions. If he's expecting a direct assault, Sarah continued, then, giving him exactly what he expects will result in a prolonged firefight in a crowded civilian area. Your team will take casualties, and Al-Mahmoud will escape. Chief Chan leaned forward in his chair. What kind of non-lethal extraction are you talking about? We can't exactly knock on the door and ask the civilians to leave. Actually, Sarah said, that's closer to the truth than you might think. She advanced to her next slide, showing a detailed timeline. The compound sits adjacent to the village mosque. Every Friday at noon, the call to prayer draws most of the adult men from the immediate area to the mosque for weekly prayers. That includes most of Al-Mahmoud's security force. Rodriguez looked up sharply. Most, but not all. Exactly. Which is where the psychological component becomes crucial. Sarah met his gaze steadily. During prayers, the compound will be guarded primarily by Al-Mahmoud himself and 2 of his most trusted lieutenants. This is when he feels most secure, most isolated from potential betrayal. You're suggesting we hit him during prayer time, Rodriguez said slowly. That's going to create serious cultural blowback. No, Sarah replied. I'm suggesting we use prayer time as cover for positioning. The actual engagement happens after prayer's end, when his guards return but before his paranoia peaks again. The SEALs were fully engaged now, their initial skepticism replaced by professional curiosity. Even Rodriguez seemed to be following her logic. Here's what I know about Al-Mahmoud that's not in any of your files, Sarah continued. He has a ritual every Friday after prayers. He meets with his inner circle in a specific room on the 2nd floor of the compound. Same room, same time, every week. It's the only time and place where you can guarantee his location. Rodriguez stood up again, but this time to get a closer look at the architectural drawings Sarah was displaying. You're certain about this pattern? I observed it personally for 6 consecutive weeks, Sarah confirmed. Al-Mahmoud is paranoid, but he's also a creature of habit. His religious observance is the one thing he won't change, even for security reasons. The lieutenant commander studied the floor plans intently. His team watched him, waiting for his assessment. After several minutes, he looked back at Sarah. Even if we accept your timeline, Commander, you're still talking about a complex coordinated strike. Multiple moving parts, civilian considerations, underground tunnels we can't verify independently. That's a lot of variables. Yes, it is, Sarah agreed. But the alternative is a direct assault against a prepared defensive position with unknown civilian casualties and a high probability of target escape. Which scenario offers better odds for your team? Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, weighing options. His men knew this look, their commander processing multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously. Finally, he spoke. Walk me through the entire operation timeline. Every detail. Sarah felt a surge of hope but kept her expression neutral. This was her chance to prove that her intelligence could save lives and complete the mission. The operation begins at 0430 hours, she began, returning to her slides. 3 teams move into position around the tunnel exits I've identified. Team Alpha secures the northern exit, which opens into the abandoned tea house 2 blocks from the mosque. Team Bravo covers the eastern tunnel exit behind the grain storage building. Team Charlie positions at the western exit near the old well. Rodriguez nodded, following along on his own copy of the area map. What about approach routes? These positions are all in the village center. That's where cultural intelligence becomes crucial, Sarah explained. In this village, early morning is when women collect water and prepare bread for the day. Your teams can approach using the same routes the women use, staying low and moving slowly. Local customs provide natural concealment. Petty Officer Torres raised his hand. "Ma'am, with respect, 24 SEALs are going to be noticed regardless of what route we take." "You're absolutely right," Sarah agreed. "Which is why only 12 of you will be involved in the initial positioning. The rest of the team remains in reserve at the staging area." Rodriguez's eyebrows went up. "You want me to split my team?" "I want you to be smart about deployment," Sarah replied calmly. "Overwhelming force has its place, but this situation requires precision. Too many operators in the village will alert Al Mahmoud's network. A smaller footprint gives you the element of surprise." The room buzzed with quiet conversation as team members discussed this unconventional approach. Rodriguez held up a hand for silence. "Continue with the timeline, Commander." At 0630, the advance teams are in position at tunnel exits. At 0800, the psychological operation begins. Sarah clicked to a new slide showing communication intercepts. "We initiate a specific radio transmission that Al Mahmoud's network will intercept. The message indicates that his sister has been captured and is providing information to coalition forces." "His sister is still alive?" Chief Chen asked. "No," Sarah replied grimly. "She was killed 2 years ago, supposedly by Taliban forces as punishment for her betrayal. But Al Mahmoud has never been certain of the details. He's always suspected she might have escaped." The psychological impact was clear to everyone in the room. Rodriguez nodded slowly. "You want to trigger his paranoia." "Exactly. When Al Mahmoud believes his sister might be alive and talking, he'll become erratic. He'll want to verify the information personally, which means breaking his normal security protocols. He'll try to contact his network for confirmation." Sarah advanced to the next slide. "This is when we hit him with the second psychological trigger. Our signals intelligence team will intercept his communications and feed him false confirmation that his sister is indeed alive and has been providing information for months. That's going to make him run," Rodriguez pointed out. "No," Sarah said confidently. "It's going to make him desperate to silence her. But he won't run because he'll think he's been compromised for months without any major operations against him. He'll conclude that the intelligence his sister provided was either false or deliberately misleading." The psychological warfare aspect was clearly something Rodriguez hadn't considered. His expression showed grudging respect for the complexity of Sarah's planning. At 1130 hours, 30 minutes before Friday prayers begin, Al Mahmoud will be at his most agitated, Sarah continued. "This is when he makes mistakes. Our surveillance indicates he'll likely call his inner circle together for an emergency meeting. Which gives us multiple high-value targets in one location," Rodriguez said, beginning to see the tactical advantages. "Precisely. But the real opportunity comes after prayers end at 1215 hours. Al Mahmoud will be emotionally destabilized but trying to appear in control in front of his men. He'll insist on holding his regular post-prayer meeting, but his judgment will be compromised." Sarah clicked to her final operational slide. At 1220 hours, your entry teams move simultaneously. Team Alpha breaches the main compound from the south while Teams Bravo and Charlie seal the tunnel exits. The reserve force provides overwatch and rapid response capability. "What about civilian extraction?" asked Petty Officer Second Class Maria Santos, the team's medic. Sarah looked at her gratefully. Finally, someone was asking about the aspect of the mission she was most passionate about protecting. "The civilian extraction happens in 2 phases, Sarah explained. First, during the chaos following our psychological operations, many of the non-combatants will naturally flee the compound. Our role is to provide them with clear escape routes away from the operational area." "And the ones who can't or won't leave?" Santos pressed. "That's phase 2, and it's the most critical part of the entire operation." Sarah's voice grew more intense. "I've identified 7 civilians being held as human shields, including 3 children under the age of 10. They're being kept in a specific room on the ground floor, separate from Al Mahmoud's meeting room." Rodriguez looked up sharply. "How can you be certain of their location?" Because I helped arrange their initial capture, Sarah said quietly. The room went dead silent. Every SEAL stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to suspicion. Rodriguez's hand moved instinctively closer to his sidearm. "Explain that statement, Commander," Rodriguez said, his voice cold. Sarah had known this moment would come, but, facing their accusatory stares, still felt like a punch to the gut. 18 months ago, I was operating under deep cover as a Taliban sympathizer. Part of maintaining that cover required participating in activities that you helped kidnap civilians? Torres interrupted, his voice sharp with anger. I provided information that was later used to identify targets for kidnapping, Sarah admitted, her voice steady despite the emotional weight. Information I was ordered to provide by my superiors as part of a larger intelligence operation. Jesus Christ, muttered Chief Chen. Rodriguez stood up slowly, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. You're telling me you've been working with the enemy? I'm telling you I've been doing my job, Sarah replied firmly. Those 7 civilians are alive today because I made sure they were valuable to Al-Mahmoud alive. Without my intervention, they would have been executed months ago. That's one hell of a rationalization, Rodriguez shot back. Sarah felt the room's energy shift dramatically. The skepticism had returned, now mixed with genuine hostility. But she couldn't stop now. Too much was at stake. Lieutenant Commander, every person in this room has made impossible choices in service to this mission and this country. You've taken lives to save lives. You've sacrificed individual concerns for broader strategic objectives. What I did was no different. The hell it wasn't, Rodriguez snapped. We kill enemy combatants. We don't participate in kidnapping innocent civilians. The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow, but she forced herself to remain calm. You're right. What I did was participate in kidnapping innocent civilians. And I've lived with that decision every single day for the past 18 months. But those civilians are still alive, and I know exactly where they are and how to get them out safely. The room erupted in angry voices as the SEALs reacted to her revelation. Some demanded she be removed from the briefing. Others questioned whether her intelligence could be trusted at all. Rodriguez held up his hand for silence, but it took several moments for the team to calm down. Commander Mitchell, Rodriguez said formally, I think this briefing is over. No, Sarah said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. It's not. Rodriguez stared at her in disbelief. Excuse me? I said this briefing isn't over, Sarah repeated, stepping forward. Because those 7 civilians are going to die if you walk out of this room right now. And because Hassan al-Mahmoud is going to escape. And because more coalition soldiers are going to die while we waste time debating the moral complexity of intelligence operations. You don't get to, Rodriguez began. Let her finish. The words came from an unexpected source. Petty Officer Santos had spoken quietly, but her voice carried clearly through the room. Rodriguez turned to stare at his medic in surprise. Chief? Rodriguez said. Santos stood up slowly. Sir, with respect, let her finish. If there are civilians in that compound, we need to know everything she knows about getting them out. Rodriguez looked around the room at his team. He could see divided opinions in their faces. Some clearly wanted to end this briefing and plan the mission without Sarah's controversial intelligence. Others seemed to recognize the value of her information, regardless of how she had obtained it. You have 5 minutes, Commander, Rodriguez said finally. Make them count. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing these might be the most important 5 minutes of her career. The weight of 7 innocent lives hung in the balance, along with the success of a mission that had taken months to plan. The civilians are being held in a room that used to be the village schoolmaster's office, she began, clicking to a detailed architectural diagram. It's on the ground floor, northeastern corner of the compound. The room has 1 entrance from the main hallway and 1 window facing the courtyard. She moved closer to the screen, pointing to specific details. The door is reinforced steel, but the window is the original wood frame from when the building was a school. Al-Mahmoud's people barred the window from the outside, but they use standard iron bars set into old masonry. A small explosive charge could remove the entire window frame. Petty Officer Santos leaned forward, studying the layout intently. What about guards? One guard stationed in the hallway during normal times, positioned here, Sarah indicated a spot on the diagram. But, during Al Mahmoud's meetings, security focuses on the second floor. The ground floor guard either joins the meeting or repositions to watch the main entrance. Rodriguez had remained standing, arms crossed, but Sarah could see him processing the tactical information despite his anger. You're suggesting we extract civilians through a ground floor window while simultaneously conducting an assault on the second floor. I'm suggesting we extract civilians first, Sarah corrected. Before any shots are fired. Chief Chen shook his head. That's impossible. The moment we breach that window, the entire compound goes on alert. Not if we do it right, Sarah replied. Remember, Al Mahmoud will be psychologically destabilized by our radio deception. His meeting with his inner circle will be heated, possibly chaotic. Add the natural noise from the mosque activities next door, and a small window breach could go unnoticed for several crucial minutes. She advanced to the next slide, showing a precise timeline. The extraction team has a maximum of 4 minutes to remove 7 civilians through a window that's approximately 3 feet by 4 feet. That's tight, but manageable if we prepare the civilians beforehand. Prepare them how? Santos asked. This is where my undercover work becomes crucial again, Sarah said, meeting the medic's gaze. I know these people. I know their names, their fears, their languages. I know which of them speaks enough English to help organize the others. I know which of the children will panic and which ones will stay calm if given clear instructions. Rodriguez's expression had shifted slightly. His anger was still evident, but professional curiosity was beginning to emerge. You want to communicate with the civilians before the extraction begins. I want to save their lives, Sarah replied simply. And I can't do that from this briefing room. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Rodriguez understood immediately what she was suggesting, and his reaction was swift. Absolutely not. You are not going anywhere near that compound. Lieutenant Commander, no discussion, Commander. Your intelligence, not operational. You stay here and provide information. My team handles the execution. Sarah had expected this resistance, but it still frustrated her. With respect, sir, I'm the only person in this room who can identify each civilian by sight. I'm the only one who speaks their dialect. I'm the only one they might trust enough to follow during a chaotic extraction. And you're also the one who helped put them in that room in the first place, Torres interjected angrily. Why should they trust you? The question cut deep because Sarah had been wrestling with the same issue for months. How could she face people she had betrayed, even in service of a larger mission? How could she ask them to trust her when her actions had led to their captivity? They shouldn't trust me, she admitted quietly. But they should trust the chance to save their children. The room fell silent. Several of the SEALs looked uncomfortable with the raw emotion in her voice. Sarah continued, the eldest civilian is a man named Rashid Ahmadi. He's 63 years old, a former teacher who tried to keep the village school open after the Taliban took control. He has 2 grandchildren in that room with him, a 7-year-old boy named Omar and a 9-year-old girl named Fatima. She clicked to the next slide, showing photos she had taken during her undercover work. The images showed a weathered man with kind eyes, sitting with 2 young children who were clearly precious to him. Rashid speaks some English because he taught it at the school for 15 years. If I can reach him, he can help organize the others for extraction. But only if he believes the offer is genuine. Santos studied the photos intently. What about medical considerations? Are any of the civilians injured or requiring special assistance? One of the women, Mariam, is pregnant. Approximately 7 months along. She'll need help getting through the window. Sarah's voice grew more clinical as she focused on operational details. 2 of the men have injuries from interrogations, broken ribs, possible internal bleeding. They can move but not quickly. This is getting more complicated by the minute, Rodriguez muttered. Sir, Santos said carefully, complex doesn't mean impossible. We've done medical evacuations from hostile areas before. Rodriguez turned to stare at his medic. Not like this, Santos. Not with intelligence officers playing dress-up in the middle of our operational area. I'm not playing dress-up, Sarah said firmly. I'm proposing to complete a mission that's been 18 months in the making. She clicked to a new slide showing communication intercepts and surveillance reports. Every piece of intelligence I've provided today has been verified through multiple sources. The compound layout, Al-Mahmoud's schedule, the psychological profile, the tunnel system, it's all actionable intelligence that gives your team significant tactical advantages. Rodriguez studied the documentation, his expression thoughtful. Even if we accept all of your intelligence as accurate, inserting you into the operational area violates every protocol we have for protecting intelligence assets. Sometimes protocols have to bend to serve the mission, Sarah replied. And, sometimes intelligence officers have to trust operators to do their jobs, Rodriguez shot back. The tension between them was clearly about more than just operational planning. Sarah could sense years of frustration from both sides, intelligence officers who felt operators ignored their carefully gathered information, and operators who felt intelligence officers didn't understand the realities of field conditions. Chief Chen cleared his throat. What exactly are you proposing, Commander? Walk me through your role in this operation. Sarah returned to her presentation, showing a modified timeline that included her participation. I insert with the civilian extraction team at 1215 hours, immediately after prayer's end. While Al-Mahmoud is destabilized and focused on his emergency meeting, I make contact with Rashid through the barred window. Make contact how? Rodriguez asked skeptically. I tell him the truth, Sarah said simply. That American forces are coming to extract them, that they have approximately 3 minutes to gather the others and prepare for window extraction, and that their survival depends on moving quickly and quietly. In what language? Pashto, their local dialect. The same language I used when I lived in their village. Santos leaned back in her chair, thinking through the medical logistics. If we have injured civilians and a pregnant woman, 3 minutes might not be enough time for window extraction. Which is why we need a backup plan, Sarah agreed. If the window extraction fails or takes too long, we need to be prepared for a fighting withdrawal through the main compound. Rodriguez shook his head firmly. No way. If shooting starts with civilians in the building, people die. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. Then, we make sure the window extraction succeeds, Sarah replied. Which means having someone who can communicate effectively with the civilians before the extraction begins. The debate continued for several more minutes, with team members raising tactical concerns and Sarah providing detailed responses. Gradually, the tone shifted from outright hostility to professional discussion. Even Rodriguez seemed to be considering the operational merits of her proposal, despite his obvious reservations about her personal involvement. Finally, Petty Officer Torres spoke up. Commander, I've got to ask. Why are you pushing so hard to be personally involved in this? You've given us good intelligence. You could step back and let us handle the execution. Sarah paused, considering how much to reveal. The truth was complex and deeply personal, tied to guilt and responsibility she carried every day. But these men deserved honesty from her. Because I owe them, she said simply. Those 7 people are in that room because of choices I made. Because I prioritized intelligence gathering over their immediate safety. Because I told myself that the greater good justified their suffering. She clicked back to the photo of Rashid and his grandchildren. Every night for 18 months, I've gone to sleep wondering if those children were still alive. If Miriam's baby would be born in captivity. If Rashid was still trying to protect them all. Her voice grew stronger. I can live with the moral complexity of my intelligence work. I can't live with walking away now when I have the chance to get them out. The room was quiet for a long moment. Several of the SEALs looked uncomfortable with her emotional honesty, but others seemed to understand the weight she carried. Rodriguez broke the silence. Commander, I appreciate your motivation. But, good intentions don't guarantee successful operations. My primary responsibility is to my team and to mission success. Adding untested variables increases risk for everyone. I'm not untested, Sarah replied calmly. I survived 18 months undercover in Taliban territory. I've been in firefights, survived assassination attempts, and successfully extracted sensitive intelligence under extreme pressure. What I lack in SEAL training, I make up for in cultural knowledge and language skills that could be critical to this specific mission. Chief Chen looked up from his tactical notes. What about compromise? What if Commander Mitchell provides overwatch and communication support during the extraction instead of direct contact with the civilians? Rodriguez considered this suggestion. Remote communication? Sarah shook her head. Won't work. The civilians have been conditioned to fear any unfamiliar voices. They'll only respond to someone they recognize, and only if that person can convince them the offer is genuine. Which brings us back to you going into the compound, Rodriguez said with obvious frustration. Not into the compound, Sarah corrected. To the window. The extraction team breaches the window. I make contact with Rashid, explain the situation, and coordinate civilian movement while your team provides security. Santos had been studying the architectural diagrams throughout the discussion. The window position gives good concealment from the second floor where Al-Mahmoud will be needing. And, if we position correctly, we'd have overwatch from multiple angles. That's still putting an intelligence officer in a tactical situation she's not trained for, Rodriguez pointed out. Actually, Sarah said quietly, I am trained for tactical situations. Rodriguez looked up sharply. Explain. Sarah hesitated. Her advanced combat training was classified at a level that even most SEALs didn't have access to. But, the mission's success might depend on them understanding her actual capabilities. My undercover work required more than language skills and cultural knowledge, she began carefully. I completed modified special operations training before my deployment. Close quarters combat, advanced marksmanship, explosive ordnance, emergency medical training, and survival techniques. The SEALs exchanged surprised glances. This information put Sarah's proposal in a completely different light. What kind of modified training? Chen asked. The kind I can't discuss in detail, Sarah replied. But, sufficient for independent operation in hostile territory. Rodriguez leaned forward, suddenly, very interested. Who's certified your training? People who know what they're doing, Sarah said diplomatically. The lieutenant commander studied her for a long moment, clearly reassessing his assumptions about her capabilities. Even if we accept that you have tactical training, this mission requires precise coordination between multiple teams. There's no room for improvisation. I understand that, Sarah replied. Which is why I'm proposing integration with your existing plan, not a replacement for it. She returned to the timeline display. Your assault teams proceed exactly as you would normally plan. The only difference is that the civilian extraction team includes someone who can communicate effectively with the targets and coordinate their movement. And if something goes wrong? Torres asked. If the window extraction fails or if we take contact while civilians are still in the building? Sarah met his gaze steadily. Then, I help get them out through whatever exit becomes available, and I take responsibility for my own survival. The stark honesty of her answer seemed to resonate with the team. These men understood accepting responsibility for dangerous missions. Rodriguez stood up and walked to the front of the room, studying the compound diagrams in detail. His team waited patiently while he processed the tactical implications of Sarah's proposal. Finally, he turned back to face the group. Here's what I'm thinking. We plan the mission two ways, with Commander Mitchell's participation and without it. We brief both versions, prepare for both scenarios, and make the final call based on real-time conditions when we're on the ground. Sarah started to object, but Rodriguez held up a hand. That's the best offer you're going to get, Commander. My team's safety comes first, mission success comes second, and everything else is a distant third. Sarah nodded reluctantly. It wasn't ideal, but it kept her in the planning process and preserved the possibility of participating in the civilian extraction. Alright, Rodriguez continued, let's talk through both operational scenarios in detail. I want contingency plans for every phase of this mission. The next hour passed quickly as the team worked through tactical details. Sarah provided cultural intelligence and specific information about the compound while the SEALs developed movement plans, communication protocols, and backup procedures. Gradually, the atmosphere in the room shifted from skeptical hostility to professional collaboration. The SEALs began asking Sarah detailed questions about Al-Mahmoud's security procedures, the tunnel system, and potential civilian reactions to their presence. Sarah found herself impressed by their thoroughness and adaptability. These men might have started the briefing with doubts about her intelligence, but they were now incorporating every useful detail into their operational planning. One more thing, Sarah said as they neared the end of the planning session. Al-Mahmoud has a kill switch for the explosives rigged throughout the compound. It's a simple deadman switch that he keeps on his person at all times. Rodriguez looked up sharply. You're just mentioning this now? I wanted to get through the civilian extraction planning first, Sarah admitted. But, yes, if Al-Mahmoud is killed or incapacitated suddenly, the explosives will detonate automatically. Jesus Christ, muttered Chen. How much explosive are we talking about? Enough to bring down most of the building, Sarah replied grimly. Which is another reason why the psychological warfare component is so important. We need Al-Mahmoud destabilized but not desperate enough to trigger the explosives intentionally. Santos looked worried. What's the range on his deadman switch? Approximately 50 meters. As long as he's conscious and holding the switch, the explosives remain stable. But if his grip relaxes or if the signal is interrupted. Boom, Torres finished. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Which means your assault team needs to take him alive, keep him conscious, and secure the deadman switch before anyone else in his group can trigger a backup detonation. Rodriguez rubbed his forehead, clearly frustrated by this additional complication. Anything else you haven't mentioned yet, Commander? Sarah considered carefully. She had revealed most of the critical intelligence, but there was one more detail that could affect the mission's outcome. Al-Mahmoud has a son, she said quietly. A 15-year-old boy who serves as his personal bodyguard and communications runner. The boy will be in the meeting room with his father. A child soldier, Santos said sadly. A fanatically devoted child soldier, Sarah corrected. Trained from age 10 to die for his father's cause. He's armed, he's dangerous, and he won't surrender under any circumstances. The room fell quiet as the SEALs absorbed this final piece of the puzzle. They were used to making split-second decisions about threats, but dealing with child combatants added emotional complexity to an already difficult mission. Rodriguez finally spoke. All right, people. We've got our intelligence picture. Now let's build an operation that brings everyone home alive. As the team began detailed tactical planning, Sarah felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. She had successfully convinced them to consider her intelligence and even her participation in the mission. But she also knew that the most difficult part lay ahead, proving that her controversial methods could actually save lives when it mattered most. 3 days later, Sarah found herself lying prone on a rooftop overlooking the target compound, her heart pounding as she watched the mission unfold through high-powered binoculars. The morning had progressed exactly according to plan. The psychological operations had begun at 0800 hours with intercepted radio transmissions suggesting Al-Mahmoud's sister was alive and providing intelligence to coalition forces. Through her earpiece, Sarah could hear the tense communications between SEAL teams as they moved into position around the compound. Team Alpha had successfully reached the northern tunnel exit without detection. Team Bravo was in position at the eastern exit. Team Charlie had encountered a minor delay when a group of children unexpectedly appeared near their route, but they had adjusted and were now covering the western tunnel. Phoenix Base, this is Falcon 1, Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio. All teams in position. Psychological operations showing desired effect. Target appears agitated and has called emergency meeting as predicted. Sarah watched through her binoculars as figures moved quickly through the compound courtyard. Al-Mahmoud's security force was clearly responding to their leader's heightened paranoia. Men who should have been stationed at perimeter positions were instead clustering around the main building. Falcon 1, this is Phoenix Base, came the reply from the command center. You are cleared for Phase 2. Initiate secondary psychological trigger. Sarah knew that somewhere in the electronic warfare unit, technicians were now feeding false confirmation to Al-Mahmoud that his sister was indeed alive and had been providing detailed intelligence for months. The psychological impact should push him toward making critical mistakes. Through her binoculars, Sarah could see increased activity on the second floor of the compound where Al-Mahmoud held his meetings. Shadows moved rapidly past windows as heated discussions took place inside. Movement in target building increasing, Sarah reported into her radio. Second floor activity consistent with emergency leadership meeting. Ground floor appears to have reduced security presence. She shifted her binoculars to focus on the northeastern corner window where the civilians were being held. The iron bars were clearly visible, but she could see no movement behind them. She wondered if Rashid and the others could hear the commotion above them, if they had any sense that rescue might be coming. Falcon 2, this is Falcon 1, Rodriguez's voice came through the earpiece. Status report on civilian extraction team. Falcon 1, Falcon 2 is in position 50 meters from target window. Awaiting your authorization to begin approach. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. This was the moment when Rodriguez would decide whether to include her in the extraction team or proceed without her. 3 days of planning had led to this critical decision. Falcon 2, stand by, Rodriguez replied. Phoenix Base, requesting final authorization for civilian extraction with intelligence asset participation. There was a long pause on the radio. Sarah knew that back at the command center, senior officers were making real-time decisions about her involvement based on current conditions and risk assessment. Finally, the response came. Falcon 1, you are authorized to proceed with Plan Alpha including intelligence asset. Acceptable risk given current tactical situation. Sarah felt a surge of relief and terror. She was going into the compound. Falcon 7, this is Falcon 1, Rodriguez's voice was directed at her now. You are cleared to accompany Falcon 2 for civilian extraction. Stay close to the team leader, follow all tactical commands without question, and remember that we can abort your participation at any time if conditions change. Falcon 1, Falcon 7 understands and confirms, Sarah replied, using her assigned call sign. Moving to join Falcon 2 now. Sarah carefully made her way down from the rooftop position and through the narrow alleyways toward the rendezvous point. Her hands were steady despite her nervousness, and her breathing was controlled. Months of preparation had led to this moment. She reached the extraction team's position just as the call to prayer began echoing from the mosque next to the compound. Petty Officer Santos was leading the 4-person extraction team, and she nodded grimly as Sarah approached. Commander, you're with me, Santos whispered. We move in 30 seconds. Remember, once we breach that window, we have maximum 4 minutes before Al-Mahmoud's meeting ends and security returns to normal positions. Sarah checked her equipment one final time. She carried a sidearm, basic medical supplies, and a small explosive charge that could be used to widen the window opening if necessary. More importantly, she carried 18 months of cultural knowledge that could mean the difference between successful extraction and disaster. Falcon 2 moving toward target window, Santos reported quietly into her radio. The team moved swiftly but carefully through the narrow space between the compound wall and the neighboring building. Sarah stayed close behind Santos, trying to control her breathing as they approached the barred window. When they reached the window, Sarah could hear muffled voices from inside the room. Her heart jumped as she recognized Rashid's voice speaking softly to someone, probably trying to comfort one of the children. Santos positioned her team around the window while one of the SEALs prepared the small explosive charge that would remove the iron bars. The charge was designed to be virtually silent, creating just enough force to break the bars free from their moorings without alerting the compound's security. Charges set, the demolitions specialist whispered. Detonation in 10 seconds. Sarah moved closer to the window, preparing to make contact with Rashid immediately after the bars were removed. Everything would depend on the next few minutes. 3, 2, 1, execute. The small explosion was barely audible, more of a sharp crack than a boom. The iron bars fell away cleanly, leaving the window open for extraction. Sarah immediately moved to the window opening and whispered urgently in Pashto, "Rashid, it's Amira. American soldiers are here to take you home." The reaction inside the room was immediate. She could hear sharp intakes of breath and urgent whispered conversations. After a moment, Rashid's weathered face appeared at the window, his eyes wide with shock and hope. "Amira," he whispered in accented English. "Is it really you?" "It's me, Rashid. We have maybe 3 minutes to get everyone out through this window. Can you help me organize the others?" Rashid's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded firmly. "Yes, yes. The children first, then Mariam because of the baby, then the injured men." "Exactly right," Sarah confirmed. "Bring Omar to the window now." As Rashid disappeared back into the room, Santos moved next to Sarah at the window. "Good contact. How many civilians total?" 7. 2 children, 1 pregnant woman, 4 adult men including Rashid. Santos nodded and spoke into her radio. "Falcon 1, Falcon 2 has made contact with civilians. Beginning extraction now. Estimate 3 minutes for complete extraction. Falcon 2, be advised target meeting appears to be intensifying. Heavy shouting from second floor. You may have additional time before security repositions." Sarah felt Omar's small hands as Rashid lifted the 7-year-old boy toward the window. The child's eyes were huge with fear, but he didn't cry out as Santos and another SEAL gently pulled him through the opening. "Omar, you're safe now," Sarah whispered to him in Pashto. "Stay with the big soldier lady. She'll protect you." Fatima came next, the 9-year-old girl moving more quickly through the window. She immediately reached for her younger brother, and Sarah could see the family bonds that had helped them survive months of captivity. Mariam next, Sarah called softly into the room. The pregnant woman appeared at the window, clearly struggling with her advanced pregnancy. It took both Santos and another team member to carefully extract her through the narrow opening, but they managed it without injury. "For more," Sarah told Santos. 3 adult men, 1 elderly. "Roger that. How are we doing on time?" Sarah glanced at her watch. 2 minutes had passed since the bars were removed. They were cutting it close, but still within the timeline. Rashid appeared at the window again. "The injured men are having difficulty moving. Abdul has broken ribs, and Jamal may have internal bleeding." Sarah could hear the pain in his voice. These men had clearly been tortured during their captivity, and the physical extraction was pushing their limits. "Bring Abdul first. We'll help him through." The next minute was tense as the team carefully extracted the injured men through the window. Abdul gasped in pain as they moved him, but he didn't cry out. Jamal was unconscious and had to be lifted bodily through the opening. "That's 6, Santos reported. 1 more." But before Rashid could reach the window, Sarah heard the sound she had been dreading: boots running down the hallway inside the compound. "Falcon 2, this is Overwatch," came an urgent voice through the radio. "Multiple armed individuals moving toward your position. Al-Mahmoud's meeting appears to have ended abruptly. Rashid, now." Sarah hissed into the room. The elderly teacher appeared at the window just as they heard shouting from inside the compound. Someone had discovered that the civilians were gone. Santos and her team pulled Rashid through the window with seconds to spare. As his feet hit the ground outside, automatic weapons fire erupted from inside the building. "Falcon 2, you are compromised." Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio. "Exfiltrate immediately with the civilians." But, as they turned to move away from the window, Sarah saw the problem. 7 civilians, including 2 children and 2 injured men, could not move quickly enough to reach safety before Al-Mahmoud's security force reached their position. "Santos, take the children and the pregnant woman," Sarah ordered. Get them to the rally point. Commander, I'm not leaving you with the injured, that's an order. Sarah snapped. I'll follow with the men. Santos hesitated for a crucial second, then grabbed Omar and Fatima while another SEAL helped Mariam. 30 seconds, Commander, then, we're coming back for you. As the first group moved toward safety, Sarah found herself alone with Rashid and the two injured men. Abdul was conscious but could barely walk. Jamal remained unconscious and would have to be carried. Rashid, can you help Abdul? Sarah asked urgently. Of course, the old teacher replied, moving to support the injured man. Sarah tried to lift Jamal onto her shoulders, but the unconscious man was heavier than she had anticipated. Behind them, she could hear voices getting closer as Al-Mahmoud's men searched for the missing civilians. Falcon 7, this is Falcon 1, Rodriguez's voice was tight with concern. Status report. Falcon 1, Falcon 7 has 3 civilians still requiring extraction. 2 injured men and elderly male. Need assistance for complete exfiltration. Falcon 7, Falcon 4 is moving to your position. Hold for 30 seconds. Sarah looked around desperately. 30 seconds might be too long. The voices behind them were getting louder, and she could see armed figures moving through the compound courtyard. Then, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Al-Mahmoud's voice, shouting orders in Arabic. He was directing his men to search the perimeter, to find the missing civilians. Rashid, she whispered urgently, we need to hide. Can Abdul move quietly? I think so, Rashid replied, his arm around the injured man. Sarah managed to get Jamal into a fireman's carry position and began moving toward a pile of debris that could provide concealment. Behind them, the voices were getting much closer. They had almost reached cover when Abdul stumbled, crying out involuntarily as his broken ribs shifted. The sound echoed in the narrow alley, and Sarah heard immediate shouts of discovery from the compound. There! The infidels are there! Automatic weapons fire erupted around them as Al-Mahmoud's men opened fire. Sarah dove behind the debris pile, still carrying Jamal, while Rashid helped Abdul find cover. Falcon 1, Falcon 7 is under fire. Sarah reported into her radio. Need immediate assistance. Falcon 7, Falcon 4 is 15 seconds out. Keep your heads down. Sarah drew her sidearm and returned fire toward the compound, trying to keep Al-Mahmoud's men from advancing. She could see at least 4 armed fighters moving toward their position, and she knew her small pistol wouldn't hold them off for long. Beside her, Rashid was trying to keep Abdul conscious while bullets flew overhead. The old teacher's hands were shaking, but his voice remained calm as he spoke softly to the injured man. Suddenly, the distinctive sound of SEAL Team weapons fire erupted from behind them. Petty Officer Chen and another SEAL had arrived, their automatic rifles quickly suppressing the enemy fire. Commander, we need to move now. Chen shouted over the gunfire. Sarah helped Rashid get Abdul to his feet while Chen slung Jamal over his shoulder. Together, they began moving toward the rally point while the second SEAL provided covering fire. The extraction became a running firefight as Al-Mahmoud's security force pursued them through the narrow alleys. Sarah found herself helping Abdul walk while simultaneously coordinating movement with Chen and the covering SEAL. Falcon 1, this is Falcon 7, she reported between breaths. All civilians extracted and moving to rally point under fire. Estimate 2 minutes to safety. Falcon 7, be advised Al-Mahmoud has triggered compound alert. Multiple enemy personnel moving to intercept your route. Sarah could see what Rodriguez meant. Armed men were appearing at intersections ahead of them, trying to cut off their escape route. The careful extraction was becoming a desperate running battle. Chen, we need an alternate route, Sarah called out. Working on it, Commander, Chen replied, speaking rapidly into his radio to coordinate with Overwatch teams. As they reached the next intersection, Sarah saw the problem. Al-Mahmoud's men had positioned themselves to block the direct route to the rally point. They would have to take a longer path through areas that hadn't been cleared by SEAL teams. This way, Chen indicated, turning down a side alley that led away from their intended destination. But, as they moved deeper into the unfamiliar territory, Sarah realized they were being herded exactly where Al-Mahmoud wanted them to go. The compound leader wasn't just trying to recapture the civilians, he was trying to force the American rescue team into a prepared ambush. "Chen, stop," Sarah said urgently. "This isn't random pursuit. We're being driven toward a specific location." The SEAL operator paused, quickly assessing their tactical situation. "What do you think, Commander?" Sarah studied the route they were being forced to take, comparing it to her knowledge of the village layout. Suddenly, she understood Al-Mahmoud's plan. "The old marketplace," she said grimly. "He's pushing us toward the old marketplace where his men can surround us." Chen cursed under his breath. "Alternate routes?" Sarah thought quickly, mentally mapping the village streets she had memorized during her undercover work. "There's a drainage ditch that runs behind the grain storage building. It connects to the irrigation channel that leads directly to our rally point." "How far?" 300 meters, but we'll be exposed for the last 100 meters crossing open ground." Chen weighed the options while gunfire continued around them. Behind them, Al-Mahmoud's men were getting closer. Ahead, the trap was waiting. "Falcon 1, this is Falcon 4, Chen reported. We're taking alternate extraction route through irrigation channel. We'll be exposed crossing open ground near rally point. Request covering fire." "Falcon 4, roger that. Falcon 3 is repositioning to provide overwatch for your final approach." The decision made, they changed direction again, moving toward the drainage ditch Sarah had identified. Abdul was struggling more now, his breathing labored from the combination of broken ribs and physical exertion. Rashid stayed close to him, offering encouragement in quiet Pashto. They reached the drainage ditch just as Al-Mahmoud's pursuit force arrived at the intersection behind them. The ditch was narrow and partially filled with stagnant water, but it provided concealment from the enemy fire. "Single file," Chen ordered. "Commander, you take points since you know the route. I'll carry Jamal and provide rear security." Sarah led them through the foul-smelling water, trying to move quickly while helping Abdul maintain his footing on the slippery bottom of the ditch. Behind them, she could hear Al-Mahmoud's men shouting as they tried to figure out where their quarry had gone. The irrigation channel was exactly where Sarah remembered it, but the final approach to the rally point would require them to cross 100 meters of open ground with minimal cover. Through her earpiece, she could hear Rodriguez coordinating sniper support for their final dash to safety. "Falcon 7, this is Falcon 1. We have eyes on your position. When you exit the channel, run directly toward the large boulder at 2 o'clock from your position. Sniper teams will provide covering fire." Sarah could see the boulder Rodriguez was referring to. It was positioned between their current location and the rally point where the rest of the extracted civilians were waiting with the SEAL security team. "Ready?" Chen asked. Sarah looked back at Rashid and Abdul, both exhausted but determined. "Ready." They climbed out of the irrigation channel and began running across the open ground. Immediately, enemy fire erupted from multiple positions as Al-Mahmoud's men spotted them. But the SEAL sniper teams responded instantly, their precise fire forcing the enemy to take cover. Abdul stumbled halfway across the open area, his legs giving out as his injuries overwhelmed him. Sarah turned back to help him while Chen continued forward with Jamal. "Lead me," Abdul gasped in broken English. "Save yourself." "Not happening," Sarah replied firmly in Pashto, getting her arm under his shoulder. Together, she and Rashid half-carried Abdul the remaining distance to the boulder where Chen was waiting. From there, it was a short sprint to the rally point where the rest of the team had established a defensive perimeter. As they reached safety, Sarah felt her knees give out from exhaustion and adrenaline. But, looking around at the 7 civilians they had successfully extracted, Omar and Fatima clinging to each other, Mariam holding her pregnant belly protectively, Rashid comforting Abdul while Jamal received medical attention from Santos, she felt a sense of completion she hadn't experienced in months. "Falcon Base, this is Falcon 1, Rodriguez's voice came through the radio. All civilians successfully extracted. Moving to secondary objective." Sarah knew that meant the SEAL teams were now moving to capture or eliminate Al-Mahmoud himself. The mission was far from over, but the part that had haunted her dreams for 18 months was finally complete. Rashid appeared beside her, his weathered hands taking hers gently. "Amira," he said quietly, "you came back for us." Sarah looked into the eyes of the man she had helped betray, the man whose grandchildren had suffered because of intelligence operations she had supported. She saw no anger there, only gratitude and understanding. "I promised I would," she replied simply. "Yes," Rashid nodded, tears streaming down his face. "You kept your promise." 2 hours later, Sarah sat in the debriefing room back at the base, still processing what had happened. The mission had been a complete success. Al-Mahmoud had been captured alive along with his dead man switch, preventing the compound explosives from detonating. His entire inner circle was either captured or eliminated. Most importantly, all 7 civilians had been extracted safely and were receiving medical care. Rodriguez entered the room, still wearing his tactical gear but looking more relaxed than he had during the initial briefing 3 days earlier. "Commander," he said, taking a seat across from her. "Good work today." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Thank you, Lieutenant Commander. Your team performed flawlessly." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. "I owe you an apology. When you first briefed us, I let my assumptions about intelligence officers cloud my judgment about your capabilities and your intelligence." "You were protecting your team," Sarah replied. "I respect that." "Maybe," Rodriguez said. "But I also wasn't listening. When Santos said let her finish, she was right. We needed to hear everything you had to say, even the parts that made us uncomfortable." Sarah thought about those words that had changed the course of the briefing. 3 simple words from a SEAL medic who understood that sometimes the most important information comes wrapped in complexity and moral ambiguity. "Your team saved a lot of lives today," Sarah said. "Including mine." "And you saved those civilians," Rodriguez replied. "I watched you carry Abdul across that open ground under fire. That took courage and commitment that goes way beyond intelligence work." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, the weight of the successful mission settling between them. "Commander," Rodriguez said finally, "if you ever want to transition from intelligence to operations, I'd be honored to have you on my team." Sarah smiled, feeling a sense of validation she had been seeking for years. "Thank you, Lieutenant Commander. That means everything to me." As Rodriguez left the debriefing room, Sarah remained seated, thinking about the long journey that had led to this moment. 18 months of moral complexity, dangerous undercover work, and personal guilt had culminated in a successful mission that saved innocent lives. She thought about the words that had made the difference, let her finish. Sometimes the most important information, the most crucial intelligence, came from unexpected sources and in uncomfortable packages. Sometimes the best way to honor the complexity of intelligence work was simply to listen, to let people finish explaining what they knew and why it mattered. Sarah stood up, gathered her gear, and walked out of the debriefing room. Tomorrow there would be other missions, other moral complexities, other opportunities to prove that good intelligence could save lives. But today, she had kept a promise to 7 people who had trusted her with their survival. And that, she realized, was enough.